Alright, so let's make some X-Wing blasters in Blender. I've got my X-Wing model over here, and what I want is to have little shapes, little cylinders firing out of each one of these guns. So I'm going to hide my X-Wing real quick, because we don't need that for the moment. Let me move my camera, get that out of the way. I don't need that yet. So what I'm going to do is make a plane, and this plane is going to fire all of our particles. For now, I'm just going to rotate this plane. It looks like X90. That's the way the X-Wing is facing. And what we want is just to, let's call that Emitter. Nice and simple. Over here to the particle thing. Hit the plus, make a new particle setting, call it blasters. Alright, so let's see. First thing, number. Well, let's just play it, see what we get. We get nothing. Right. So we have to set the start frame. Now, my start frame is always 1001 for reasons not that interesting. I'm going to set that for the full length of this thing. So we get a bunch of blasters. Well, not blasters. We get a bunch of balls raining out of this thing. Cool. That looks fun. Let's go over here to the scene settings and turn off gravity because we are in space. And now they're firing a bunch of things really slowly. So go to the source. Well, actually, let's go to the number and make that something like 100. 1,000 is probably way too much within 250 frames. So source, emit from faces. We only have one face because this is just a plane, and that's what we want. One face, particles per face, 1. And we can leave all the rest of this alone. Let's go back to the beginning, start it up again. So now your particles are firing from the center of this plane, which is just what you want. And so we have, they're moving way too slowly, so go down here to velocity, make this something high, like 300, because we're firing like bullets. There we go, cool. Alright, looks cool. But doesn't look like a blaster yet. So what we need is to make a cylinder. Make it, I'm going to switch this so it isn't flat. It looks kind of weird. Make the cylinder, make the radius nice and thin. This isn't that important to get this exactly right. Make that maybe 4 vertices. We don't need that many. I'm just going to make 10 because it's just going to be moving so fast you're not going to really know. And that cylinder, I'm going to put that into a new collection and call it Blast. And then under the render settings here in the particles for your emitter, go down to render as collection, set blast as our collection, and use whole collection. That'll come up later as to why. Scale is set to 0.05 by default. I'm just going to put it at 1 and figure out what I want later. So let's play it. Cool, we're firing bars. Looks terrible. We need them to be rotated in the right direction. They're not right now, so let's grab our cylinder and which way? X maybe? X90? Will that do it? Yes, that does it. All right. So let's hide this for now. This is why we make it a collection, because we can hide the source. Cool, we're firing that. Now one thing, let's go back into here. I'm going to turn this on. It's in the middle of this, which is kind of strange. It's going to be firing like half of it at the beginning, and it's kind of a waste. You can move it up so that it always fires the whole thing like this, but I don't really like, that doesn't feel very clean to me. So what I prefer to do, I'm going to go up here to the top view, and I think that's the top view. Hold on. Yeah, that's the right direction. And I'm just going to move it up, and then go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. The 3D cursor is at the very center, which is where this is. I mean, the 3D cursor is there by default. So that just feels cleaner to me. I don't know if you need to do that. It seems to work either way, but I just like it more. Okay, so we've got that. Looks cool. Except, if you rotate this, point it at something else, well, that looks terrible. That's just weird. Now, I had this problem on my little Star Wars shot I did before, and it drove me insane trying to figure out why that was. And the reason is that we need to go down here to rotation under the emitter settings and turn that on, and that allows it to be rotated, I guess, in alignment with the emitter. I don't really know, just know that it has to be on. But now it doesn't look right at all. That looks weird. So now these settings, I don't know if any of these are, I don't know what half of this stuff means. I just kind of pushed the buttons until it worked. Let's turn our blast back on and rotate our cylinder. Let's do 90 on the Y. Did that do anything? No. All right, turn that off. Back to our emitter. Let's turn the orientation axis to normal tangent, which I think will work. All right, not quite, but go back to our cylinder. 90, does that do it? No, that doesn't do it. Maybe this one will do it. Hey, look, that did it. See, every time I do it, it seems to be different, or I just don't remember what I did. Whatever, doesn't matter, that seems to work. Turn that off real quick. Go back to our emitter. Let's rotate it. Hey, look at that. We're shooting blasters. Isn't that fun? Okay, so we've got a functional emitter here. Great. Let's give it some color. So, not the emitter, sorry. Go back here to our cylinder. Give it a new material. Just set it as emission, because we're just emitting light from it. And make it red, but not perfectly red. A little up there from red. Because I'm going to turn it up really high. And what I want, I'm going to turn this little EV-ish thing on. Go over to my EV settings, just because it'll be faster, and turn on bloom. And that way you get this nice glowy thing with a white hot core. It doesn't have to be entirely white hot. You can set this how you want. Sometimes I like to put it down a little bit so it's kind of getting there, maybe 30. There you go. It's bright, but not overwhelmingly. It looks the way it does in Star Wars. They have red glows with a white hot core like a lightsaber or a blaster most of the time. So turn that off. Cool, look at that. That's rad. I love it. Okay, turn this off because it's a bit much. Okay, good time to save. Let's turn on our X-Wing. Okay, here's our X-Wing. Great. So what we want is to put this emitter at every one of these guns. So let's go into the front view, grab our emitter, and just position it until it's right up in there. And it's a little big, but we'll deal with that in a minute. I'm going to turn on wireframe real quick and just stick that guy right in the middle there. It looks a little big, so I'm going to go over here to the emitter settings and change the, where is it, render, change the scale until it's small enough to fit in there. Okay, while we're here, you know what, let's turn off show emitter. We don't want that to be visible. Look at that, you got it right there inside the barrel. Let's move it up so that when it fires, it's kind of emerging from there. It's a little big, so again, make the scale a little smaller. We could probably go a little bigger, so it's like the size of that. Now, it's gotten a little shorter because I've changed the global size, so I'm going to go back into my blast and just grab the cylinder and just scale it so that it's a little bit longer on that blue axis, whichever, I guess that's Z, I don't know, doesn't matter. Okay, back to this view. So now we've got one blaster firing out of there. Cool. Let's also go into the emitter settings under viewport display, turn off emitter. I really don't like seeing that emitter. Okay, cool, look at that. We got a nice blaster. I like it. So we want 4 of those. So I'm gonna go back to the front view, grab my emitter, and I'm gonna hit Shift D and escape just so it doesn't move around all weird. And then we just gotta go in there, position these. Okay, so now we've got 4 blasters set up, but you'll notice they all fire the same way. It might be kind of hard to see, so I'm going to turn this thing on. Let me save before Blender crashes. Oh, which it tends to do. Okay, let's make that a little easier to see. So now you've got all these blasters, but they're all firing exactly the same way, which X-Wing blasters can do according to the 90s X-Wing games, but that's kind of not fun. So what's better, and also, okay, so you could go into each one of these and duplicate the emitter settings and change whatever you need to change to make that, I don't know, maybe the seed. But you know what, it's a lot easier is to just shift select all of these, hit Control J to join them, then you have one object with 4 faces, and because we set the source to be 1 particle per face, then it just picks a random face and fires from there each time. It's cool, right? I think it's cool. Maybe you don't think it's cool. It is. All right, looks great. Look at that, we're almost there. But you'll notice they're not really emitting any light on the X-Wing there. So because these are emissive, you could just turn that way up. If we go into cycles, and hopefully that won't take too long. So while we're here, actually, let's also go into the emitter and bake this. It'll make it a little easier to work with. So we've got one firing right now, and it's maybe putting a little bit of light on there. So you could go into the surface there, or the surface, and crank up the strength to like 300 or something, and there you start getting it there. But for one thing, that's going to make your core really, really hot and white, and you may not want that. And then you're also going to have to turn up your diffuse samples really high to get this to not be so noisy. So I'm going to leave that at 30, which is where I like it. And instead, because we set up the emitter to use the, where's our render settings? Because we set that as whole collection, all we gotta do is go back into that blast collection and add a light. I'm gonna add a point light. Go into my light settings, make it red, that can be pure red, and turn this way up to like 500 or something. Look at that, it already looks cool. So let's hide our blast. And now, well, we're in cycles, so it's gonna be kind of hard to see, but we got that. Now let's also go back into our cache and delete the bake. Bake it again. Look at that. That looks pretty cool. At least I think it does. What's going on there? Let's go back into here. Let me see what's going on with this. It's being a little weird. I'm gonna delete the bake. Bake it again. Let's go into Eevee and see, there we go. So this is one of the secondary advantages of using a light instead of the emission, is that you can see it in Eevee, which means you can get a nice viewport preview of what your blasters are going to do. That's not enough light, is it? Let's give it more light. Let's make this a ridiculous number. Let's make it like 1,000. Nope, that's 100. Is that enough? Is that enough for you, computer? There you go, look at that. Cool ass red murder lights. I love it. Now, you might notice sometimes that it's not quite hitting where you want it to. So you can move that light along here and it'll change where it sort of is on that cylinder. Go back to our emitter, delete the bake, and look at it again. Looks pretty cool. One thing I want to make sure I do, I go to this cylinder under this little, whatever this yellow square thing is, and go to visibility and turn off shadow. I think that helps to not block the light at all. Looks cool. All right, I love it. Let's turn off that collection again. So that looks great. So let's move on to rendering. I'm going to put my camera with a Control-Alt-0. Oh, look at that. That's not even widescreen. What am I doing? Amateur. 1920 by 816, or whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. And let's just lock the camera to this view so I can move it. Cool. All right. Moving on to rendering. I'm going to use cycles to render this because I like cycles. It lets me do motion blur and all kinds of other cool things. Real quickly in here, I'm going to turn render region on so I'm not wasting the power of my computer. All right, so there we are. Now, I like to turn on motion blur for blasters. What that'll do is, and if I open up oops, that's not what I wanted. Come on. There we go. I'm going to open up the image editor. Go under here to render result, shift home to see the whole thing. And let me just change some render settings here. There's a lot of images in this thing, so I like to use persistent images and save the buffers. I don't know if that's the right settings or not, but it seems to be fine. I'm going to leave this at 128. It doesn't really matter. I'm just messing around here. So if I do a render, so that looks cool, but you don't see the actual blaster the way you do in the viewport. That's annoying. I paid for a blaster. So the reason for that is where your motion blur is positioned. I find that if you put it on start on frame, you're gonna have a better time. Look at that. Looks cool, right? I love it. All right, I'm gonna set my render resolution to 50% just because we don't have a lot of time here. Oh, turn that render region back on. Okay, that looks rad, right? Okay, so I like to separate the blaster into a separate render layer from the rest of the ship so that I can control things like I'm going to put a glow on it, and I may want to control the intensity. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call this layer XWing, and I'm going to make a new collection, call it Blaster, and then I'm just going to hide that in this collection, and then make a new one, copy settings, and call this, hold on, let me turn that to solid so it's not trying to render the whole time. Okay. Call this Blasters, and then turn this on, and turn, I like to put my lights, like my scene lights, like this sunlight that I have in here, I put that into a collection so that if I want to, I can just turn it off. And that way we have these two layers, one which is the, let's look at it real quick, not that quick, whenever you're ready, there you go. So we have our blasters, and then we have our X-Wing. Cool. So when we hit render, what we're going to get, in theory, is, zoom that in. We have our X-Wing, and then we have our blasters. So with that in mind, see now, so we can switch between them, blasters, X-Wing, really cool, right? Hit save just in case. I'm going to close that guy up. I'm going to open up the compositor. Get rid of that guy. Use nodes and shift home. Now you might be thinking, why don't you use a backdrop for this? I don't like using a backdrop. I don't like having nodes on top of my image. It's really annoying to look at. So I keep the render result over here. And it's more the way I'm used to doing things like in Nuke. So speaking of Nuke, when I did this shot originally, I did it in Nuke. Nuke is where I'm most comfortable, but you can easily do this stuff in the Blender compositor. It's just not how I did it. So I'm going to Shift D this render layer, make that blasters. Look, you can see it right in there. And I'm going to put a mix, and I'm just going to mix this one in, call it, make it add. So now it's adding that to that. Pretty cool, right? And then put a nice little glare. I don't know why they call it glare. Everybody else calls it glow. You guys want, Blender calls it glare. Whatever. Gotta be weird, Blender. Make it a fog glow. Let's make it high, because we're ballers. Make it 9. Look at that. That's cool. I think that's cool. Maybe you don't think it's cool, but I think it's cool. Look at this. Oops. Look at that guy. Pretty cool, right? I like it. So that is just about everything for doing blasters. I want to show you one other cool thing. Let's go back to our 3D viewport, if you would please. There you go. One little cool animation thing while we're here. You want to give random movements to a spaceship? Well, for one thing, forgot to do this. Let's grab our emitter and make it a child of the X-Wing so that when it moves, that moves with it. We're going to want to go into here and, oh, we didn't bake that. Okay, if you had baked it, you'll want to delete that bake, because now that it's parented to another object, it's going to need to be in a different position the whole time. So let's go to our X-Wing. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can because I don't want this tutorial to get long and boring. Oops, I moved my camera. The graph editor. Okay, let's grab our X-Wing. Let's make hit I, make a keyframe for location and rotation. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter what, you're not really using it for that, you're just getting it in there so it shows up in the graph editor. Hit N, go to modifiers, go down to noise. There we go. Hold on, I'm gonna actually make sure I select a specific axis. So let's say Y location, I think that's the one I want. Noise, let's make that a little bigger. Let's make it like 30 and 0.1. I don't really know what these numbers mean. I just do them until they look right to my eye. So actually I'm gonna go over to here and get myself out of the camera so that I can very quickly see what I'm doing. That's not nearly enough. Strength, let's make it 1. Oop, that's not the axis I wanted at all. Okay, let's try Z. Noise. Hey, look at that, it's going insane. It's like on a bumpy road. Well, that's not quite what we're after. Let's do 30 and 0.1. Maybe that's not quite enough. 1? Sure, that'll work for our purposes. So we see we get a nice little bobbing up and down motion, as if the pilot's kind of slightly compensating for spatial distortions. I don't know. So let's copy that and let's grab the, let's say Y rotation. Don't know which one's which. Paste it. Oh, look at that. I'm going to change the phase. And maybe make that a little bit less. Make it like 0.5. Maybe even less than that. 0.05? 0.1. There you go. Let's make it 0.2 so you can see it. So now, real quickly, all you've done is make one keyframe, set some parameters, and you've got a nice little human error looking cool thing in here. I'm gonna save before I mess something up. Yeah. Look at that. You got blasters, you got random motion going on. I love it. Well, I think that just about does it. We made blasters in Blender. Goodbye.